Welcome back, everyone, to the weekly Armchair Kickoff podcast. We're on our United show today, Devil's Advocate, and today we are joined by a very special guest here this evening. I am joined by United Henry, known as Henry from the United District podcast, and today we are going to be talking all things Manchester United. So what we will be chatting about today, we will be going through the weekend's victory against Liverpool. We'll also be looking ahead to our midweek fixture against Sheffield United, and also we'll be looking into stuff like Paul Pogba as well, because he seems to be a very big talking point within the Manchester United fan base at this moment in time. Firstly, Henry, I'd just like to just talk to you about your own podcast, the United District podcast. You have a very large following with that. I see you're doing tremendously well with your own podcast, the United District podcast. Just talk to our viewers kind of about your podcast and how that took off.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, mate. It's a pleasure to come on here. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to come on here. First of all, talking about the United District podcast, it was a bit of a coincidental sort of thing, really. Obviously, the guys over at United District, they started a page and just started posting news, etc. I'm sure most people would have heard of United District. You know, they've done a really good job with sort of posting news and stuff like that. And it was in the last lockdown, the first lockdown rather, in sort of last March, and they wanted to start a podcast. And I'd done bits and pieces on YouTube here and there, just doing my own sort of thing, interviewing people. And they saw that. I knew the guy who was running the page, and he said, "Do you want to start off a podcast?" And we did it, and it's been great fun ever since. You know, really enjoying it. It's great fun. I mean, I'm sure you know sort of the fun of talking to people, talking about United. Yeah. It's just a really sort of fun thing. I don't know. There's no really sort of negative things I can say about that, but yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and it's going well. We had a bit of a break, but we've started it up again now, and it's been really good. Thank you, mate.
Yeah, and that's good, and you're doing very well with the podcast yourselves. And look, just like any of us, like when you're talking about Manchester United, regardless of what way we're going in terms of results, it's always good to talk about the club you love, especially during this time, during the pandemic, when you're not having face-to-face interaction with fans at the moment, because we all obviously have to abide by the guidelines and stuff like that. And I think since like last April, like when everyone locked down, you kind of seen kind of an increase in fan channels and podcasts and stuff like that in general, just since that point, because like we're all kind of missing out on that kind of fan interaction that you would have on a match day, or you would have, if you're traveling over and back to Manchester in general. So like I completely agree with you in terms of like doing this kind of work. It's very refreshing, and it's very good for the mind also.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, as you say, we've been sort of, I don't want to use an extreme word, but we have really been sort of starved of any sort of interaction, especially, as you say, around sort of match day banter or whatever, sort of around football. So as you say, it's always good to chat football. I like to just take in all different views as well, to be honest. I've always been the same with that, really, even outside of football, just everything, politics and any other thing. I like to just hear all sides of the story, really. And I think that's the sort of good thing about podcasts and listening to. You get to hear sort of a varied range of views, which is always good, I think, rather than sort of surrounding yourself in an echo chamber where you sort of are just bouncing off the same views and ideas and listening to similar people. If you get a broader range and listen to loads of podcasts, you get different views and ideas. So I think that's the beauty of it, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I myself, like I'm involved with all different podcasts within the Manchester United circuit, and like as you say, it's not like an echo chamber where it's all just a one view and it's agenda driven. Like there is so many different opinions out there, and what's great about it is like when you get all them different opinions, you see different perspectives, and you take, like, you might analyze a game differently after hearing somebody else's view on a situation. You might take other things into consideration. So I'm definitely 100%. I'm in total agreement with you in regards to that. Henry, kind of looking at the weekend, Manchester United, we were playing in the FA Cup in the fourth round against Liverpool, our biggest rival in English football. And for us, I think this game, the FA Cup, massive game for us in terms of our season, because people have been obviously branding us as a team that's been kind of the nearly team in the last kind of 2 years, in terms of like when you talk about the 4 semi-finals, when you talk about kind of results recently against the so-called bigger sides. For you, kind of how would you view the game against Liverpool on Sunday? Because it was a fantastic performance for Manchester United, and we got over the line. And for us, I think psychologically for United, that game could have been a catalyst to drive us for success this season.
No, definitely. I completely agree with what you said there at the end as sort of a catalyst of success. And I think always a win against a big side, and specifically a win against sort of a local, sort of traditional historical rival in Liverpool, is always going to get the players up things. At least if they sort of understand the complexion of that game, which over the years I think is something we've doubted a lot about the players. Do they understand the sort of the magnitude of games like that? And I think that 3-2 obviously result does prove that, you know, this set of players now does understand it, and the way they performed was fantastic. You see the passion for Bruno when he scored the goal, and you see the celebrations of Cavani, even, you know, Greenwood, Rashford, everyone. There does seem to be an understanding now and the togetherness, and I think it's definitely it's hard to find any fault when you win against Liverpool, no matter what score it is. Obviously, this is a proper Liverpool side we're talking about now. I know they've been, had awkward times this season and not been as good as the past couple of seasons, but we are talking about, the former sort of European champions and the current champions of the Premier League. So when you beat Liverpool, no matter what scoreline, it's always good. When you put 3 past them, even better. You could argue that perhaps there were a few sort of defensive, instabilities with, some aerial duels being lost here and there, and a bit of sloppiness for their 2 goals. But, I struggle other than that to find fault. It was a really good all-round performance. Obviously, Bruno Fernandes, you can't sort of wax lyrically enough about him. Just a magnificent sort of impact player. Whether he starts or comes off the bench, he seems to win football matches for us, which is, a magnificent thing to have, something we've struggled with over the years as well. I can't speak highly enough of Edinson Cavani. I think, just to have a proper 9 like that at the club, experienced, a wise sort of older head is fantastic to have. And as Jamie says there, hopefully we are going places.
Yeah, and like when you look at the squad there, Henry, like I think that was a massive thing for me on the weekend when you seen like Ollie made a few changes, like Dean Henderson comes in, Joe Victor Lindelof comes back in at centre half. Then you have players such as Cavani, Greenwood, who haven't kind of featured predominantly in the last kind of couple of weeks. Bruno, obviously, who's been our best player since he's come to the club, this time last year, it was about then when he signed. Like when you looked at that and you looked at a couple of changes that Ollie made, it kind of highlighted the squad depth that we've had, because like last season, I think you seen Ollie was reluctant to use the squad because you had players like Lingard, you had players like Pereira, you had players like Dan James who came in, and like you'd seen the drop off in quality when we had a couple of injuries, and when you look at it now. There, you see the quality and the strength and depth that Ollie has, and as you said, like players like Edinson Cavani, who is massively experienced, and he's someone who I think players like Greenwood, players like Rashford, players like Martial, who can all kind of who they can learn from. Like they're all still very young and they're quality players. But the fact we've leaders, we've serial winners in the dressing room. You look at Bruno Fernandes, like he's almost been that missing link we've been missing. Since post Sir Alex, like when you think about like leaders in the dressing room, and you think about players who demand more, in terms of performance, and he, like, even when he isn't playing well, if he's not having his best game, he's still delivering that level of production that we don't regularly see if a player has a poor game. And I think that's when you have a quality player in your hands. Like in terms of like that game, like you look at the performance of Marcus Rashford. Kind of how would you assess Marcus? Because there's been a lot of kind of criticism as of late in terms of decision making in games. But for me, I thought everything he done against Liverpool just came off, and he had one of his finer games in the United shirt. Kind of where do you stand on kind of Marcus's performance in the weekend?
I thought at the weekend he was absolutely magnificent. I thought it's probably the best performance we've seen from this season. I might be wrong in saying that, perhaps jumping the gun, trying to think of other performances, but I think it'd definitely be up there. I think it was just a really professional all-round performance. Obviously, the pass to Greenwood was absolutely magnificent, and something that is somewhat new to Rashford's game, really. We haven't seen much of a playmaking sort of style from him. That's always been something, as you say, the decision-making and, the passing, the final ball perhaps has been something that a lot of people have been critical of, but there was no sort of signs out of the weekend. And that ball to Greenwood with the assist was obviously a perfect demonstration that, he's now starting to grow and become more well-rounded and professional sort of in that sort of sense. And he scored a goal as well. So goal and assist, it's extremely hard to have any doubts about that performance. It was really good for him. Very well-rounded. I think there are still some inconsistencies with him. I don't want to directly compare him to Ronaldo. I'm aware that's a comparison that's sort of been made a lot, and perhaps a lazy one considering they have got a similar sort of build and played in a similar position. Obviously, it's hard to compare anyone to Cristiano Ronaldo, but it does remind me a little bit of the sort of the younger Ronaldo that we used to see at United. That was still a bit malleable. Sir Alex did have to sort of drill him into the man that we've now seen him sort of become in a sense. So I think, there's still a way to go for Rashford, but the signs are there. When he plays on the left and goes up against fullbacks, and the other day, he definitely had the beating of Trent, and when he got one-on-one with Reece Williams as well, you could see, he was causing him all sorts of problems, and that's the Marcus Rashford I think we'd like to see more. So we'll have to see what we do with the front three as well, because obviously he is sometimes getting thrown out on the right-hand side. Obviously that's the problem we have when you don't have a natural right winger at the football club, but if we can get him to play consistently on the left, I think he's going to be a magnificent force to have.
Yeah, and look, for me, I think over the last 2 seasons, he's been absolutely magnificent. And when you consider, like, last season before Bruno came in, before Rashford actually got that back injury, he was arguably carrying Manchester United on his back. In that respect, I know it's kind of ironic that injury kind of happened at that present time. When he got that injury. But we have a question in here from Shane, who's a weekly Armchair Kickoff podcast regular on the United Show, and he's a Manchester United fan. Shane says, and he's asking you at the moment, Henry, how many wingers are better than Marcus Rashford in the Premier League? I think easily he's top 5.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think he does get into the top 5. I'm struggling to list him off the top of my head. I think probably Mo Salah I still think is a magnificent footballer. I think people would still argue Sadio Mane's up there. Sterling's not been fantastic this season, so I think maybe you could say Rashford.
Maybe Heung-min Son probably.
Heung-min Son, yeah, that's a good point. Heung-min Son probably, but yeah, I think he probably is top 5. I think that's probably fair to say. I think that's quite comfortable, and that says it all really. We're saying that there's some inconsistencies with it perhaps, and he's easily top 5 Premier League. I mean, that just tells you where his ceiling is and what we could sort of see him do in the next few years. Hopefully, he just explodes. And as Shane says there as well, that he reminds me of the 6-7 Ronaldo. Hopefully, sort of in the next season or two, we can see the 7-8, sort of 8-9 Ronaldo sort of come to fruition, which would be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, that would be unbelievable if we even get like 50% of that. Yeah, we have a fantastic player in our hands. Exactly. Just another player who's been playing fantastically at the moment, Henry, is Paul Pogba. He's a player, look, we all know it's well documented in kind of the last kind of 4 seasons that he's been with us, that there's been kind of controversy with him in terms of his stance at the club. But since his agent Mino Raiola has made them comments before the Leipzig game, Paul Pogba is arguably Manchester United's best player in terms of his performances. I think when he came off the bench at Leipzig game, he had something to prove. And it looks like he's really turned the corner in terms of his form. How do you analyse how Ollie's kind of managed the Paul Pogba situation and kind of how he's gotten the best out of Paul during the last kind of 7 or 8 weeks?
I think Ollie's managed it brilliantly. I think you've got to give a lot of credit to Ollie in that sense. He's not really added fuel to the fire in any sort of sense. I think he's kept within his boundaries and his standards and just kept it sort of kept Mino Raiola talking the talk and Solskjaer sort of stepping back and letting sort of Raiola do what he wants, and then managing Pogba sort of in-house behind the scenes, which is what I imagine is going on, and training with him like a usual squad member, which is what Pogba is at the end of the day. He's a fantastic player, arguably, well, he probably is, on his day, 100% a world-class midfielder, but, everyone's a member of that squad, and no one should have any sort of no one should be ranked higher than each other, if you know what I mean, in sort of the manager's eyes. So I think, he's done well in keeping Pogba grounded in that sense by sort of not giving too much fuel. And I think, as you say, after the Leipzig game, there was definitely a point to prove, which I think is good to see from Paul Pogba. I think earlier in the season, I was quite critical of him. Perhaps rightly so. I think, there was a lot of inconsistencies. I remember the Spurs game, the 6-1 was one that really sort of bothered me. Just everything about sort of the way he was carrying himself, his body language, I thought really frustrated me. And there was other games where, obviously Arsenal gave away the penalty, which Aubameyang sort of scored from, and we ended up losing from. But then after that, as you said, the Leipzig game, he did sort of click into gear, and now we're seeing a really good professional Paul Pogba who's got his head down now and is properly playing for this football club. I don't have any doubts anymore now that he's definitely playing for that badge, which is obviously key when we're now sort of in a title race. So obviously need every player sort of playing to their best abilities. I think Pogba's doing that now. So it's brilliant to see. I think you've got to give credit to Ollie first and foremost for, the way he's handled it. But I think you'll give credit to Paul Pogba as well, because I think, his agent talks a lot. It'd be easy for him to get his head caught up in that and sort of get driven away from the football. And I thought there were signs of that, but completely dispelled of that now. And he's got his head down and, what a player is on his day. So it's good to have him sort of playing his best.
Yeah, and like when I look at it, like when you look at the performances of Paul, I think one thing we've seen is that he's delivering big moments in games. And I think that's what people have been crying out for in the last kind of 4 or so years. I think especially it's been highlighted even more since Bruno has come into the club, because Bruno's been producing big moments in games. He's been getting them important goals at important stages. I think that's what Manchester United fans were looking for Paul Pogba to do, in the last kind of 4 or so years. But when you consider, like, I suppose Pogba now has the quality around him that he haven't had, in the last kind of 4 years. When you consider when he first came to the club, he had likes of Marwan Fellaini, he had likes of them players at the club who weren't as good as the players like Bruno and Donny van de Beek, and kind of, even you can even say like likes of McTominay and Fred are providing him with the kind of space in midfield where he didn't have previously, so to go and kind of express himself. And I think when you consider Paul Pogba now, if he can keep this form up between now and the end of the season, I have no doubt Manchester United are winning a trophy this season. In that respect, I think if he can keep up this form, you have quality players like Bruno Fernandes, and if when you think about we're top of the table at this moment in time, and Mason Greenwood and Anthony Martial have hit nowhere near top form yet. If they could start chipping in with a couple of goals, I think Manchester United we'll be in a very, very good spot come late April, early May. When you consider also that there's players like that haven't hit top form, and last season after the lockdown, when the lockdown lifted and the Premier League returned, they were our best players, that front three, Martial, Greenwood, and Rashford. And Rashford starting to grab them important goals again. And you also see Mason now, that goal against Liverpool, I think that's a massive confidence booster, more than anything, because it's well documented that he's had his troubles this season, and I think for any young man to go through what he's had to go through this year, it would affect anybody, and especially a man so young as him. You can see why his performances dipped early on in the season, but when you see that composure in front of goal on Sunday, he was ice cold, and I think that scoring that goal on Sunday, especially against a team of the quality of Liverpool, that gives him such a lift. And I think in the next couple of months, we're going to see the best of Mason Greenwood again. I think without a shadow of a doubt, he's going to show why he's so highly thought of, not just by the club, but by the fan base as well. Because I think amongst the Manchester United fans, we hold them in such high regard. And I think maybe a Manchester United future number 9 for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably a fair shout, and I think there's a lot of people who over the past couple of years have sort of echoed that, with sort of saying that they believe he could be, the Manchester United 9 going forward, and people having big aspirations and sort of predictions of how sort of high and how far he can go. And as you say, no, I think that the Liverpool goal, he needed it badly. I think that's I think that's fair to say. I think everyone would sort of agree on that. He desperately needed a goal, and he's obviously got that goal, as you say, against a club like Liverpool. So the rivalry, a big game. A knockout FA Cup game. So it's just everything about it it's just good for him to have that on his CV now, and to have it in his head going forward with a confidence boost. And obviously, as you say, we've already mentioned the sort of impact of Edinson Cavani, having him around. You saw the other day in that Liverpool game some of the reactions, and you saw Cavani sort of instructing him in some sense. And I mean, that's only good for a young player like Greenwood. I think we'd all agree on that as well. So yeah, I think hopefully we can see him hit the form he hit last year, because obviously I think if he does so, he's going to give us sort of around another sort of 10 goals from now to the end of the season, which would be a magnificent addition to have to sort of our sort of artillery going forward. So yeah, we'll see what happens with Greenwood going forward. But I think, as you say, when he gets scoring, he's a real force to contend with.
Yeah, I think, when you see a player like Mason Greenwood who has 2 feet, and he's arguably probably the best finisher at our club, he can start hitting form. Teams below us are in trouble. I really do think that he's such a good player, and he's so thought of, and the sky's the limit for Mason at the moment. Just before we kind of look into kind of the Sheffield United game, I'd just like to talk to you about Bruno Fernandes kind of in further detail, because there's been if anyone who follows me on Twitter and follows his podcast knows that I'm a huge Bruno Fernandes advocate. He's my favourite Manchester United player, and I think since Sunday I've kind of ruffled a few feathers over on the Liverpool side. I think what kind of thing that's trending on Twitter today about a certain former Liverpool player blocking a lot of Manchester United fans. I've ruffled a couple of feathers with regards to Bruno Fernandes in the last couple of days. But what do you make of this whole kind of, I suppose, false kind of propaganda at the moment in terms of Bruno Fernandes not delivering in big games? You see he's scoring goals in all Manchester, virtually all Manchester United's big games, and he's been arguably the best midfield player in the world since the start of the season. What do you make of all these false claims that Bruno Fernandes though is not a quality football player?
No, it's just rubbish, isn't it? I mean, I think you're with me on this. It's just a load of rubbish. I think, whenever a player's good, rival fans are always gonna get a stick and beat them with it, no matter what kind of record or statistic or metric they can pull out. They'll use that to prove their point and hold an agenda, which is a shame, obviously, but it's what happens, unfortunately, with football and the sort of the. I don't want to say that the toxic side of things, because in some ways it is banter from rival fans. I mean, we could all have a little dig at, Firmino, for example, Roberto Firmino sort of season, or Salah, or whoever else. We all have sort of banter in that ways, but I struggle to see how you can seriously think that Bruno isn't a top world class footballer. I mean, the goal contributions over the past year have just been out of this world. I mean, they're up there with. Some of the sort of, up there with Messi, Ronaldo, and sort of Lewandowski, and then those players who are performing with great output as well. And obviously, some of the goals numbers that he's scoring as well from a number 10 position is remarkable. So, yeah, I struggle to see how anyone can sort of criticise Fernandes or what he's done. I think the idea that he doesn't do well in big games is quite frankly rubbish as well. I think, there's many big games, even if he doesn't put up a goal or assist, which he has in quite a few of them as well, by the way. He hasn't completely blanked in every single big game he's played. Obviously, we've seen the other day, he comes off the bench in an FA Cup game and knocks Liverpool out with a stunner of a free kick. But even in games where he doesn't get goals and assists, he's constantly driving the team forward. His mentality has obviously shown fantastically since he came in last year, and his sort of winning desire has obviously bled through into other aspects of the squad, and sort of the results have come with that as well. So, yeah, I think we shouldn't really give them the sort of airtime to even speak about some of the stupid claims that are made around Bruno, because I think he's a fantastic footballer.
Yeah, he's a fantastic player, and when you look at how good he's been, and since he's come to the club, and he's been a proper catalyst for Manchester United's resurgence since he's come in. I think the claims are just outrageous, and the fact you've actually brought up goal contributions. I have a stat here with regards to Bruno. This was actually brought up on Match of the Day on Sunday night after the Liverpool match. Only Harry Kane behind him. Like, Bruno has had 45 goal contributions, 28 goals and 17 assists since he's actually come in to Manchester United. When you consider Harry Kane, who is, I think arguably the best natural number 9 in world football area at the moment. He's been fantastic this season. Yeah. And since that time, since Bruno's come in, Harry Kane has 5 less goal contributions than him. Harry Kane has 26 goals and 14 assists. When you consider that company that Bruno's up there with, when that's like a gilt-edged world-class number 9, never mind Bruno's a number 10, and he's producing them numbers. I think, like, when people start talking about that he's not quality, it's just absolute nonsense. But again, it's just biased. Like, we probably talk about Kevin De Bruyne, and we would try to dismiss him, even though, like, look, he's a fantastic footballer, and the fact he plays for City, we would try to put him down. But I absolutely agree. It's absolute nonsense in that regard. Henry, when you looking ahead to Sheffield United, again, this game is a massive game for Manchester United season. We're at home, currently top of the league. I want to reiterate that again. Manchester United are top of the league at the moment, 6 points clear of Liverpool, and it's a massive game. I think nearly every league game now, like Joe, in these next couple of weeks, because this fixture this is so congested, now every league game feels like a cup final, especially with the position that Manchester United are in. Considering the fact, like, when you look at Manchester United's game Sunday, we made a couple of changes. Van de Beek came in, Victor Lindelof came back in. To the side, Mason Greenwood got a run out in the FA Cup as well. For you, kind of, how are you feeling about this game? Do you think is Ollie going to kind of rotate the squad again to kind of keep the squad fresh, or do you maybe think we're going to see more or less nearly the same team that came in against Liverpool on Sunday?
I think it could be actually quite similar to the Liverpool one, actually. I mean, I just think about straight away with sort of the goalkeeping decision. I mean, that is a choice that he's got to make, obviously. And we know in the sort of reverse fixture at Bramall Lane, he started Dean Henderson, which was a bit of a shock at the time, really. I think no one had perhaps expected that. But obviously there might have been this sort of thought in the back of Ollie's mind that, this was Dean Henderson playing against a club that he knows very well. Obviously was on loan there last season, and he obviously started that game. And it'll be interesting to see if he gives him sort of back-to-back starts now. Obviously starting against Liverpool and might start against Sheffield United again. So straight away, that's a choice that he's got to make. I'll be interested to see if he picks Tellez at left back. I thought Tellez might start against Liverpool. Obviously, he went to Shaw instead. I think, to be honest, I can't speak high enough of Luke Shaw at the minute. I think he's been absolutely magnificent. I think, probably consistency wise, probably the best player at the club right now, Luke Shaw. I think he's been pretty much flawless for multiple games. I'll come on to that in a minute, because obviously that's been something that's been bound about quite a lot. But I'll be interested in what he does with left back, what he does up front as well. Cavani's obviously now played back-to-back games. I'd love him to start a third in a row, but I'm not sure if he will. I think possibly might go with Martial. We'll have to see. We'll have to see what he does in that regard. But no, there's a lot of decisions to make. But I think, this is the brilliant thing about United at the minute. Our depth is so much better, as you say, than it was last season. He was looking to sort of Lingard and Pereira, and as you say, James was very much in the sort of starting sort of lineup. And obviously he didn't trust that squad as much, but I think he's got a squad now in which he really trusts. He's happy to rotate. He's happy to move things around. And yeah, I think, we'll have to see what he does with the lineup. But I think I'm confident no matter what side he puts out at the minute, I'd be confident that they'd be sort of in a good enough position to go and get us the 3 points, which I think is a beautiful thing as a United fan at the minute.
Yeah, just before we kind of come to Tim's question in terms of United's league position, and people are calling it a false position. Well, look, for me, I think when you actually look at Manchester United's team, at the moment, as we both kind of discussed, last season we didn't have that many choices to come from if we wanted to rotate the squad. Even there was young players were nearly getting thrown into the matchday squad. Such players as Tai Chong and Angel Gomez were getting put into the matchday squad, not even being used. Because Ollie kind of probably didn't have that level of trust to rotate the team too much. But when you actually look into it now, you look at the game like Liverpool on the weekend. He brings in a player like a Van de Beek. He can bring in a player like Victor Lindelof, and then between him and Eric Bailly, they've been kind of yo-yoing in the last kind of couple of weeks in terms of the partner for Harry Maguire. And look, both of them have done fantastically well in the last couple of weeks, which I think we're reaping the benefits from that. And again, you mentioned Luke Shaw. For me, I look at it in terms of left backs in England this year. I think him and Andy Robertson this season have been the two best left backs in England this season. Yeah. I strongly do think that. When you consider the 6-1 game against Spurs, it was one of Luke Shaw's actually worst performances in a Man United shirt. Then Man United go out and sign Alex Telles, and his days look numbered as Man United's first price left back. And as we've seen when Brandon Williams came in last year, Luke Shaw, when he has competition, he thrives. He thrives when he has competition in that play for places, and his squad position is under threat. And I think we're reaping the benefits for having competition there. And we had that so much under Sir Alex, where in nearly every position we had a player for that position, and we had a replacement. I think only Gary Neville was, as they said, was probably the only person that was probably a cert. In terms of position the team. Remember Roy Keane said it on Sky Sports. He said because we had nobody else. But when you actually when you look at Manchester United teams historically, we had in midfield you had a Scholes, you had Keane, then you'd have a Varane, Nicky Butt. On the wing you had Ronaldo, you'd Ryan Giggs. So you had players like that, and then you had a player like a Ji-Sung Park who could come in and contribute to the squad and give us something different. Even in the 2008 season, when we went on and won the double with the Champions League and the Premier League, you had Anderson, you'd Owen Hargreaves, you'd Carrick, even Giggs played the odd game in midfield as well, Paul Scholes. And then when you look at the front three, I know the fabled front three was Rooney, Ronaldo, Tevez. I know Louis Saha had a lot of injuries that year, but he was someone who was thereabouts when he was within the squad, that if a number 9 didn't play well, Louis Saha was there. So when you consider previous Manchester United squads that have been successful, we've always had squad depth. And I think now what we're seeing since the couple of signings in the summer, like the Van de Beeks, the Cavani's and Alex Telles, we're seeing a lot more competition for places. And what it's doing is creating a mentality, the squad, that everyone's on their toes and there's no complacency. I think that's very, very important if you want to win trophies and you want to be successful, going forward. But in terms of this this league position, Manchester United have been the informed team in the last couple of months, and we've been playing, in my opinion, fantastic football. It's been entertaining to watch. Even the games when we go from behind, it's edge of the seat stuff. Man United that this current crop of Man United players aren't going to give up, and there's always a chance that we're going to win nearly every game we play. When you consider Manchester United since Bruno's come in, when you look at that timeline, February 2020 to now, nearly February 2021, Man United are now at top of the league, and we've been the informed team in the last 12 or so months. And Manchester United in a false position.
I mean, I'd argue there's no such thing really as a false position. I think any side who gets to the top, especially when you're top of the league, any side who gets to the top of the league gets there on merit. You don't just sort of stumble a few wins together and manage to find yourself top of the league. It's got to be consistent quality. And that's exactly what we've provided. We've provided a magnificent consistency in getting points, and it's a good point there from Tim. When the Europa League kicks in, we'll have to see how he sort of deals with that. But I think I'd be confident as we mentioned with the depth that we should be right to contend with that. But we'll have to see. But no, I think the false position thing is a really silly argument. As I said before, points are only relative to the season in which you get them as well. I think a lot of people do a lot of sort of mental gymnastics thinking about, how many points did City get this year and how many points would you need to get. It's only relevant to the year you're playing now. And, with the current situation, Manchester United are top of the league. You can say, City have got games in hand. That's fair enough. City, we'll have to see. They haven't won those games yet, though. They're not bankers. They haven't won those games in hand. And obviously, they're playing again tonight. We'll have to see. You have to watch closely, see how Sam Allardyce gets on against Pep. But, I'd argue there's no such thing really as a false league position. It's funny when it's Liverpool fans coming out with that. When if you actually look at the table, there's all sorts of teams with games in hand around Liverpool. I mean, they've got to be careful themselves. They're going to be in a battle of top 4 in a minute if they're not careful. I think that the false position thing is a silly argument.
I think, do you know what I think it is, Henry? I think it's spite. I think it's worry. I think Liverpool fans, especially, and former players and pundits, are trembling. They're absolutely trembling because they know, right, if Manchester United get up and they win the league, they know that it's the end of the world for that fan base. When you think about how much they're crumbling, they won their first league in 30 years.
Yeah.
And they're defending it miserably, I think. I think they're really defending this title miserably. There was talk last year, they compared this Liverpool team to the 1999 Champions League team. I remember they done on Monday Night Football, they tried to do a combined 11.
Yeah.
Which I think was absolutely ludicrous considering that they weren't even Premier League champions at that point. Don't ask me why they done that, but like when you actually consider this Liverpool's team and their defence of the title, it's not the best defence of a title. And when you consider the fact that Everton have a game in hand, Villa have about 4 games in hand over them, like when you consider all that, and them teams go on win them games in hand, Liverpool are outside of the top 4. So for any Liverpool opposition person to say that Manchester United are in a false position I call that false, and I also call it false propaganda. But when you actually do consider it, I think we've been the informed team since this time last year. The stats back that up.
Yeah.
In the form table, Man United have been the form team since before even the lockdown. Like when you consider this, even before the lockdown, we're taking that into consideration. So when you do look at that false position claim is false. Yeah, 100%. In terms of this, like Sheffield United again, just kind of coming back to that. Sheffield United are also missing, looks like they're going to be missing up to 9 first-team players, first-team squad members coming into that game. Are you considering like their team fighting for their lives? Would you be highly confident going into the game? Because you know yourself, when Man United come up against, and nearly any top teams come up against a relegation threatened side, these games don't tend to be easy. And we, as Manchester United historically, we always like doing it the hard way. Are you massively confident going into this midweek game?
I am confident. I mean, that's not a great thing to say, is it? Because I think usually your sort of words can come back to bite you really when you say that you're confident in things. Especially as a United fan over the years, we've seen a lot of sort of results where we've been confident and excited. Obviously, it hasn't gone the right way. We've got to be careful, especially considering we've lost. Sort of 4 semi-finals in the past year in games that we've been sort of confident for and excited for, and games we've gone to lose. So I think we've got to be careful in that sense. But I am confident. We've shown an ability in the past few weeks to grind out results. Obviously, as you say, we've come from behind so many times. Everton, even Fulham last week. We just grinding out results. Southampton, obviously, as well. But yeah, that's been a really good aspect to this side. And you'd think again, this is a home game this week, which obviously even in the COVID era, you might say that perhaps that doesn't have much of an impact, but I think it does give an extra confidence when they're playing at Old Trafford. Even though obviously I know how good we've been on the road, but you think there should be a game we dominate. You say Sheffield United are missing players as well, which is obviously a shame for them. Obviously, as you say, they're now fighting for their lives, and actually there has been a bit of upturn in their form as of recent. Really, they sort of picked up that win against Newcastle. It was, I believe, they beat what is my local club, actually, Plymouth Argyle, in the FA Cup as well at the weekend. So they've done They've done well in the previous weeks, and they're definitely a side to be wary of, because we know that Chris Wilder is obviously a fantastic sort of tactician, and that he can sort of set his side up well. And I think they've been decently unlucky this season. Obviously, they're now struggling. They've got to sort of pick up form. So yeah, it's a big game for both sides, sort of at top and bottom of the league. And it's whoever gets those 3 points will be absolutely buzzing.
Yeah, now look, I think for me with Sheffield United, they have a lot of Irish contingent at the club as well. So for me, I was kind of hoping they'd stay up this year. Now it's looking like most likely they'll go down. For me, from an Irish perspective, I'm kind of selfish in that way. I kind of want to see the likes of John Egan and Enda Stevens and McGoldrick kind of stay up, because for our international team, we're kind of in dire straits and we need as much Premier League experience kind of, as possible. But yeah, look, I think, it won't be a walk in the park. I think we will win the game. And I think with the squad that we have, we can make a couple of changes, even if needs be, and we still have enough to win the game. And we have a question in here from Tim with regards to Cavani. He says, has Cavani coming in actually hampered Martial? He doesn't seem like the type of player who is really up for fighting for his place.
I think that's a really interesting question. And actually, there is sort of past proof of this. I remember when sort of Zlatan Ibrahimovic came and obviously signed on a free from under Jose Mourinho, a similar sort of signing to Cavani in a way. I think, although we were probably more reliant, I should say, on Ibra than we were perhaps Cavani. But, obviously Martial lost his number 9 shirt and it got given to Ibra. And there seemed to be, stories of him sort of sulking in a sense. And, you can't read too much into stories like that. But, Ibra came in and sort of became our main man. And obviously, I have nothing bad to say about Zlatan Ibrahimovic. As a 35-year-old who came in on free, I thought he was absolutely magnificent, and the injury sort of hampered him. And in a similar sense, now Cavani's come in, and that was a signing I was really sort of advocated for. I thought, another experienced player with sort of European pedigree coming into United. I think we do lack a bit of that, especially in that front line. Obviously, it's a very young, sort of youthful front line. Greenwood, Rashford, Martial. And, Cavani's obviously been magnificent. I'd actually say Cavani's probably the best 9 at the club right now. I don't know how sort of agreeable that would be. I don't know if you agree with that, but, a lot of people have debated over that. Obviously, Martial was magnificent last season, but I don't think I think that's Martial's fault if he has been hampered by that. And I struggle to sort of say whether that's the truth or not. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes and Martial's sort of attitude to things. And if it's just, players do have just natural downturns in form. It could just be that. But as I say, it's previous with Ibra. And if that is the case with Martial, I mean, I think that's a poor mentality on his behalf, I'm sorry to say, if that is the truth, because, a player, as we've already spoken sort of extensively about on this so far, having good competition should always be a good thing. You've said in the past, United side, it's obviously been a key to success. Obviously, and Luke Shaw's a perfect example as well, with Tellez coming in, and he's been, absolutely brilliant. So you'd hope Martial would step up and hope that isn't the case. But if it is the case, I think, that's his fault and no one else's, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, look, I think in terms of your point with Cavani being the best number 9 at the club, I think in terms of natural number 9 at the minute, he's definitely the best number 9 at the club. You see he moves differently than any of the rest of the strikers we have. Yeah. His work rate off the ball is absolutely fantastic. And look, when you have someone who can be a target man, he can bring players into play. He can also go in behind. He has everything what a number 9 has. I think he's probably the most. I know Zlatan is a fantastic striker. But I think Edison gives us that bit more in terms of movement, in terms of overall contribution to the team. Now, I know Zlatan scored a lot of goals, but in terms of overall play, you want a kind of a modern striker, he's given us that. I think he's probably the most natural number 9 we've kind of had since before Wayne Rooney left the club. When Rooney left in 2016, he was probably one of the most natural number 9s. He could do everything. Yeah. I think Edison can do everything. Now, look, it's a shame we're getting him now towards the twilight of his career, but I think it's been a masterstroke by Solskjaer getting him in. It's someone who can the likes of Greenwood, Rashford, Martial can all learn off him. And you think Martial is still youngish, he's still about 24, 25. He hasn't hit his prime yet. I think this should be an education for him. When you consider he still hasn't fully evolved his game, and I think. And Edison Cavani being there, and we're in so many competitions, and the fixture list is congested. I think this shouldn't hamper him. If anything, this should help him. Yeah. But again, it just depends on his mentality and kind of how he takes to the transfer. In that regard. And even Charlie McNeil, who is a young striker and who is at the club, and he's tearing it up down the younger kind of age groups. And there's talks of him kind of coming in around the first team, even just training with him. Having a player like Edison at the club like, and having like even the younger players like Charlie McNeil, they can all learn from him how he trains, even little details like that. Players pick up on that, and I think him being at the club, and there's talks now that he might stay for the extra year. I think that'd be a massive stroke, because then I think what that could do, if not, this doesn't help Martial, I think Mason Greenwood, I think this could be a proper learning experience from him. And look, and as we said in the show earlier, as we seen Sunday, like Mason has them ice cold, ice cold in his veins. And like when you consider if he can evolve just other things in his game in terms of his overall link up play, in terms of his movement, again, I think we have the future Manchester United number 9 for the next 10 years. Like he's that good. I think he can definitely evolve into that. Just coming to kind of, I suppose, the final bit of the show, which usually, we get the score predictions. But I'm just going to just ask you I'm going to throw a curveball at you in terms of a question, in terms of Manchester United. Like you're covering Manchester United kind of for a long time now yourself, and like you've been Manchester United fan for a long time. I'm just going to ask you, what is your favourite Manchester United memory kind of growing up watching the club?
Well, I'm actually, I'm quite young. I'm only 18, so I haven't got, it's going to be, perhaps for some listeners, they might think it sounds like a sort of very recent moment, but obviously, it was when I was quite young. I don't know, I've got quite a few, to be fair. I think one that always sticks in the memory is Michael Owen's winner against City at Old Trafford in September 2009, I think it was. I remember watching that and just going absolutely mad, and my dad picking me up, and when Michael Owen scored that, which was just obviously a fantastic memory. Obviously in recent years, the Europa League win was brilliant. Obviously it was really sort of pertinent in the way, obviously there was that trouble with the Manchester bombing just the week before, and then going on to sort of win that. It seemed like a very sort of emotional and meaningful trophy win, that one. Pogba's brace at the Etihad when we came back there was obviously another fantastic moment. I think, when you support such a special club like United, there's so many special memories that you sort of are created and sort of stick in your head. So I've got so many that I could list off, but I think those are just a few of them. But yeah, there's so many with United. I think you'll agree. There's so many. I bet you could list off as well. Yeah,
like look, for me, like there's so many. I think for games I've personally been at, the 2017 EFL Cup final against Southampton, Zlatan scored the winner the last minute. I actually nearly got a broken nose when he scored the goal, because there was a guy like in front of me. He was like 6'6", about that height, and he's a really big guy. And like when Zlatan jumped up and put the ball in the back of net, we all jumped up and celebrated. But your man's so big, he threw his elbow back, but obviously he wasn't on purpose. And I got drove back into my seat, and my nose was pumping with blood. Like, and he's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I was like, "We're after winning the cup. You're fine. Don't worry." Like it was one of them things. Like it was happy, and the fact it was Jose Mourinho's first trophy at the club. Yeah. Like when you look back at it now, it's a false dawn. When you look at, like, I thought at that moment, he's a serial winner. We're going to get to league titles, and Man United are back, basically. That's the way I was feeling that day. Obviously, for me, the 2008 Champions League final was a sweet win. Growing up watching that game, I was living in a house full of Liverpool fans, and they were all kind of hoping Chelsea would win that day, and for John Terry to slip missing the penalty, that was that was quite sweet too. So that was that was great for me watching that game. And I think for me, one of the favourite memories, as well as the day Sir Alex Ferguson won his last Premier League title. And like, I know for Manchester United fans, it's probably one of the saddest kind of days as a Man United fan, but to clinch the title the way we did that day against Villa, that 3-0, and we done it in style. It was a fitting way for Sir Alex to kind of go out and kind of clinch his legacy. Well, even though his legacy was always clinched, but to win the title in the final season in the fashion we done it, I think that was one of my kind of big takeaways kind of growing up as a Manchester United fan.
Absolutely.
But finally, just come to the final part of the show, is score predictions. Now, always when I come to the panel on this, there's always ridiculous score predictions. There's certain score predictions that come in there. We always kind of, I suppose, we throw them out there, I'm going to come to your score prediction for Sheffield United. Obviously, they're a team who are down the bottom end of the table. Man United are at home. We're the most informed team in the league at the moment. How are you feeling? How do you think it's going to go down?
I think we should be relatively comfortable. I hope we'll be relatively comfortable. I don't think it will be an absolute hammering. I'm not sure. In the past couple of weeks, we haven't really seen that with any of our games. They've all been sort of tightly contested games. So I wouldn't say anything, massive. I'm gonna go with 2-0. But although I do feel we possibly might concede, I think we conceded twice to them in the end, didn't we? At Bramall Lane. I think did that game finish 3-2 in the end? I think it might finish 3-2. But
I think it was 3-2, and Dean Henderson, remember the corner.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so we could concede in this game, but I'd hope that it'd be comfortable at Old Trafford, a bit different. So I'm going to go with a quite a measly and boring 2-0.
Yeah, I'm going to go double that. I'm going to go Manchester United 4-0. I'm just going to go on the basis. Look, I think Sheffield United missing 9 first team players. I think that's massive. I think they had a fully fit squad, and they came sat the low block. Might be different, but I think with them missing players and the fact our squad is relatively fresh and we have so much quality in our squad at the moment, I think we have enough the squad to do it. I'm going to go with 4-0. I'm going to go with Marcus Rashford won't be playing, actually. I come to think of it because I think he's injured. Did he go off the weekend? So I'm going to go with Martial to get on the score sheet because, again, we talked about him tonight. I'd like for him to prove me wrong, and I'd like for him to get on the score sheet. I'm going to go Mason Greenwood. And just for my lovely Liverpool fans and friends, and especially for a certain Liverpool fan and former player and pundit who blocked me on Twitter today, I'm going to go with Bruno Fernandes with a brace, and one of them will be another Bruno Fernandes penalty that will be justifiably awarded by VAR in that regard. But I'm going to go 4-0. Hopefully, regardless, I don't care if it's 1-0 and it goes in off a Sheffield United player. Once Manchester United get the 3 points, that's the most important thing on this road to a potential 21st title. 21-21. Let's hope that's possible. That would be fantastic for the Manchester United fan base, especially during this hard time for everybody at the moment. Henry, for yourself, just before we wrap up, where can our viewers find you on social media and YouTube?
First of all, thanks for having me, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed this. Obviously, it's always good fun talking anything United, especially when we can be positive as well. Because I think in the past sort of year, quite a lot of sort of negativity and talk about that. But we can be completely positive at the minute. At United Henry on Twitter, ask me Twitter and then at United District as well with the United District podcast. So yeah, always knocking about trying to do something around Twitter. So yeah, thank you, mate. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. And do catch that podcast, lads. It's a very good show, and they do fantastic work over there. And do give Henry a follow on Twitter as well. And I do like to thank Henry for coming on and taking his time out of his evening and to come on to talk to us as well about all things Manchester United, especially when there's football on the telly as well. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of there's football on every day, and it's kind of hard, I suppose, even for myself to even do stuff half the time when there's a match on the telly. So really do thank you for coming on as well. And for everyone as well, we are back this Friday on the United Show Devil's Advocate. I am joined on the show by Lee Judges from AFTV, where we will be previewing Manchester United versus Arsenal. We will be going head to head, combined 11s and stuff like that, even though I don't think there's anyone from Arsenal who will get into that team anyway, but we'll definitely chat about that anyway. And also our London club show, the London Lowdown, is back this Thursday. Our host Sean Maroney will be hosting the London side of things. They'll be covering all the London clubs such as Chelsea, Arsenal and Tottenham, and we will be having an opposition preview on that as well in terms of the big game between United and Arsenal. So do check that out also. And again, as always, do like, share and subscribe to the channel. And I do appreciate everyone's support, and I do appreciate Henry coming on this evening also. So do check that out. But thanks everyone for watching. Thanks again to Henry for coming on. And look, we'll be back next week.